Welcome to AI Role Models, a podcast from One Strategy Studio that goes beyond the hype to explore how real leaders are transforming their businesses with artificial intelligence. In each episode, I'll sit down with pioneers from the world's leading brands who are reimagining marketing, insights, and innovation with AI. But we're not here to talk about theoretical possibilities. These are candid conversations about the real challenges, unexpected victories, and practical lessons learned from implementing AI in organizations. Here's today's episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of AI Heroes by One Strategy Studio. I'm your host, Dave Crothers, and I'm delighted to be joined by our guest today, a good friend of mine from the industry, Mr. Jason Hauer. I'm sure a lot of you have met Jason, spent time with him, worked with him in the past. Definitely one of the legends of the insight space and the innovation space. Jason, welcome to the show.
Yeah, good to be here, Dave, man. Always great to see you, buddy.
Of course, man. Of course. So before we kind of get into it, maybe just set the scene. Obviously, you know, you built the Garage Group, an incredible company doing innovation for kind of Inc. 500 companies, Fortune 1000, you know, helping companies kind of grow like startups, bringing that, you know, really one of the pioneers of bringing the startup mentality into these bigger companies. You're now focused on building this portfolio of AI native companies and looking at kind of what modern enterprises need for growth. Maybe just share a little bit more about kind of what you're doing in this. Now you've transitioned away from Garage Group and have been building kind of HauerX over the last few years.
Yeah, building Garage Group was amazing team, really good run. Like we sold that business about almost 5 years ago,
which is wild. It feels like yesterday.
Yeah, time flies. But great team, still doing good work there, and it's always an honor to kind of be a part of that, and then really just kind of transitioning into what's next. Is I've always loved triangulating, kind of understanding kind of what's next, and then translating that back for relevancy. Obviously, like the innovation, growth, commercialization space has always kind of been my sweet spot, and always wanted, like, building the company and selling it, you understand creating enterprise value. So always wanted to be more of an investor than just an operator. And so this transition to HauerX Holdings, where basically we're building a portfolio of AI native companies, compounding growth for the now. So it's really backing and building companies that help enterprises turn AI into revenue, margin, speed. So like from $10 million B2B companies that work in the CPG ecosystem all the way up to the Fortune 500 kind of brand companies. And we do everything from predicting trends to using agentic AI to kind of enable faster execution, to kind of go to market activation as well. And like we've been at it for a bit, and I feel like I'm just now getting started with as fast as AI is evolving and changing.
I mean, it sounds a fascinating journey. I mean, you talk about how fast AI is evolving. I think that's a theme and a topic that comes up so much. I mean, how do you, with everything that's moving in the space and how quickly things are changing, when you're looking at kind of the companies that you are partnering with, investing in, looking at kind of bring into some of your enterprise clients, what is it that kind of breaks through or is standout for you? And, you know, in a world where lots of people can build lots of things, what do you think it is that makes some of these companies cut through?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I feel like it gets clearer as there's more certainty on the AI front, but I mean, there's certainly just table stakes things that are they just legit from an enterprise security build standpoint. Are they LLM agnostic, meaning like the capabilities there, but they're not dependent on how good ChatGPT or Claude is today. But then kind of beyond those kind of table stakes things, I really look at where the needs from the enterprise client capability standpoint, in terms of, instead of just doing primary research or even using synthetic consumers, it's really where can we predict cultural trends, predict where things are going. Where can we take, like FifthRow is a good example of like taking the bottom 80% of innovation, strategy, market research consulting, and basically automating a lot of it with agentic AI. And then like Board of Innovation is another one where it's building these very robust engines that can predict in a particular space, come up with concepts, and then basically almost like do the go-to-market launch component of an initiative, right? So it's how can things be faster, better? How can we get to better predictive insights that maybe we couldn't even get to before? And then how can we enable execution that was basically be impossible with AI? So like those are the kinds of companies that I'm interested in. Less so, it's a little bit of a better way to do what companies have already done. Because I feel like we're still in the infancy, but I feel like the top leaders that have been experimenting with for a while, or they're looking to drive more automation, more prediction, trying to have a lot more at bats in the pipeline versus just automating kind of the like 1 or 2 or 3 innovation kind of pipeline workflows or work streams that they might be working on.
I mean, when you think about kind of, clearly the efficiencies there from a speed perspective and from a cost perspective, there's benefits, but the big one that's, so often subject to a lot of debate is quality and the ability of, what can these models do, how far can they stretch, what can they truly predict about the future, and there's we could talk for hours on that, but I guess what's your kind of starting philosophy around some of this in terms of where where quality is today, is it where it needs to be, and how that plays into kind of where those enterprises are innovating?
Yeah, I definitely know there's quality issues on the like call it synthetic consumer side of things. Like I don't necessarily play there as much. I feel like where I've seen both quality of data and quality of prediction and execution has been like Nichefire is a good example of predictive cultural intelligence. So being able to scour on particular like areas, what are the unknown unknowns that a brand ought to be paying attention to in culture. So I think GLP-1 early helping kind of Nestle identify this isn't just a fad. This is there's a collision course with a lot of your categories and subcategories you play in. Let's understand it, and then let's help you drive that to kind of execution. Vital Pursuit's an example, right? So that to me is one. Like AI Palette's another interesting one to where they have well over 60 billion data points of like food and beverage data globally from what's happening on social to e-com. And they have on the platform 2 years, but then back of house, they have like 4 years of maybe even more of data that they can predict off of. So they know if something's matured, declining, and or emerging down to like the country or part of the country that's happening in. And so like I feel like when predictive intelligence, whether it's culture, flavor trend, ingredient trend, is almost democratized, then it becomes a matter of like how much faster can you move with that intelligence. And that's where things like FifthRow, where you can automate the work of a work stream or a value chain comes in. But then like 3D Color is another example of a company in my portfolio to where they do more 2D, 3D prototyping and helping go to market, just kind of selling with retailers and consumer research. You can use AI to automate, but then you also need execution partners that can kind of stay with the pace that you're trying to go at and to be able to move fast, right? So again, back to your question on types of companies, like those are the types of companies, but then when we get into the weeds and the nuance of the work, to me, it's about faster intelligence you have confidence and believe in, and then the leadership culture to kind of set the bar to like, hey, we want to get to market twice as fast as in the past or however fast, but then also making sure that you have the right partners beyond just the AI capability to actually move fast. So you're not accelerating the first 10% of the process, but then the rest of it kind of stays stuck, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we've seen a lot at. It's, we can definitely go fast, but is everything around that, the other parts of other stakeholders, other partners in the process, are they able to kind of move at the same speed? I was listening to a fantastic webinar yesterday. It was more on the AI engineering side of things, but it was talking about how essentially bottlenecks had shifted from kind of writing the code, which used to be a big part of that, to essentially the alignment and getting people agreed. I guess, where are you seeing the bottleneck shift to, particularly around innovation in this new world now that, as you say, there's definitely areas that we've sped up, but is that creating new bottlenecks, or are you not seeing that?
I don't necessarily know bottlenecks as much as I do see legacy mindset of we only have a certain amount of budget to invest in a certain number of work streams or initiatives per year, versus saying like search at some level is commoditized, and you can have as many like search work streams in play as possible, and then having a filtering mechanism to say, okay, these are the ones that we're going to drive forward, right? So
yep.
I think to me, the bottleneck is more leadership mindset of making what we've done in the past more efficient, versus saying, because now we have access to all this predictive capability on culture, ingredient trends, we can build these engines, thinking about it more as a volume play of how much more volume and activity can I get in the system to actually like guarantee certain in-market success outcomes, like
yep.
that's to me where the gap is right now. And I think you're going to continue to see as agentic AI becomes more pervasive, and you're able to automate a lot more of the dot connecting between the context building, research, coming up with the concepts, and then testing, and then drive and go to market. I think you'll start to see more volume pick up in terms of the robustness of a portfolio. But right now, I don't see that a ton.
Yeah, I think your point about search is great, and that kind of legacy mindset of we have this work stream, we go through this process. I was listening to a fantastic podcast a few days ago. It was a CTO of Block Square talking a lot about kind of their kind of agentic approach to various things, and the biggest thing that came out of it is, obviously as humans, we're this Monday to Friday 9 to 5 corporate kind of thing, but you've got this capability to have agents kind of working on these tasks 24/7, and the ability, always on search, always on discovery, always on trends, being able to kind of connect these dots. And that's becoming, easier and easier now to, as you say, provide additional context to the business, connecting to multiple things. I mean, I think kind of the whole MCP side of things, whether you think that's just market and hype or not, it's definitely going to change things in terms of the ability to take a more agentic approach.
100%. And I think like that, again, it's only as good as like the data you train with it and how you think about it, right? So do you have the context built in terms of strategy, equity, where you can stretch, what data it's in taking, and are you using proprietary on the edge and or proprietary sources of data to fuel a lot of that? Like, to me, like that's table stakes. But then to me, the teams or the brands and the companies that are going to have an advantage are the ones then that start now, and then they compound the intelligence and learning, and they're able to then predict at scale like what's going to work or not, and just to be able to move a lot faster with a lot more confidence, right? And
that Block example was, they've got this internal tool that's actually open source. It's called Goose, which essentially is a bunch of MCP connectors. And they were talking about an example of an engineer, and I think this could be applicable to anyone, not just engineers. But as you know, like, engineers tend to tinker with this stuff first, and it becomes more mainstream. But he would have Goose essentially listening during their meetings around discussions around new functionality, new features. And then off the back of that, it was going off and doing multiple builds and multiple attempts to build what was discussed. And he was then actually reviewing the approach. It didn't even ask him, I even have to ask it to go and do it. It was just automatically saying, I've heard this in the meeting. I know they want to build this. Here's 5 examples. And so his job now became, reviewing that stuff. And, you start to think about where that can go as teams are doing this. Data's connected, and having, having a meeting on a Friday afternoon and coming in on a Monday morning to actually like look and, again, I think we've always said it on strategy, AI really frees up time for critical thinking, to be strategic, because you're not having to get so bogged down in the day-to-day doing.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like, I found that both sides of it, right? Like, I've definitely seen, just for my leadership and running my holding company, of automating things and freeing up time. But I also feel like for certain issues or challenges or opportunities, like, it just gives me a lot faster, really robust insight in a particular area. And so it just makes me better that way, right? So it's just kind of that intelligence unlock. And I think there's both sides of it. I think the thing for me, regardless of if it's efficiency play or an intelligence play, is like, and I think I posted about this on LinkedIn last week, but just still being disciplined on 10-20% of your week. Really, and I know it sounds like a lot, but I feel like we're in a time of pretty dramatic change, of paying attention to what's new, experimenting, trying things. And even the simple example of, like, I feel like for a while I was using ChatGPT just about every day, and I still would use Claude a couple times a week just to make sure like things aren't shifting and changing. And Claude just recently got sneaky good on content, working with Excel files, doing financial modeling, financial analysis, right? And if you're not in the game trying this stuff, like, you don't understand it. So to get to the efficiencies and to get to the intelligence unlocks, I feel like you just have to be using it constantly, and paying attention to what's happening. Like Superhuman, you're probably on it. Like, it's a great newsletter. I see a lot of cool stuff come through that. I talk to a lot of people, and I'm always curious, but then I don't stop by writing down the tool. I go use it and try to break it and say, is this better than what I'm doing now, or not? And then I'll check back on the stuff, right? So I think just having that curiosity to experimentation mindset, and then scaling what works, being okay with getting rid of and pruning tools that just maybe were good for a season but not anymore. Like, all that stuff to me contributes both personal productivity, but also on capability stack, whether it's innovation or commercialization for sales and marketing.
Yeah, there's so much happening, and I agree that we're in this new paradigm, and there's these new tools, and there's the only way to really understand the capabilities is to use them. The only way to try and do stuff is build the app on Lovable, integrate connect your key things into Claude, structure this stuff, have it build artifacts, whatever it might be. A big unlock for me, I think, that I found has been there's an app called Whisperflow, which is one of the best like voice to text things that I've ever seen. And voice to text has always been a challenge, but this is genuinely like instantly quick, really picks up on that. And I think now, because it's so much faster for me to kind of engage with the model in a verbal way, even when I'm working on building stuff or engineering stuff, whatever that might be. Just again, even the way we're engaging with this stuff has been great.
Absolutely. And even like simple things like Gamma app for visualizing presentations, like it's just helpful in terms of, okay, this is what I'm trying to communicate, kick it out at Claude, go over there, but just kind of being able to kind of jump between tools, stack tools. That to me is the other thing too, to where I feel like that's something you learn as you experiment and try things. But I know you're able to move exceptionally fast because of that, and I think just having that mindset, it's a powerful thing, and I think it's a big unlock. And I think from a leader, like we were talking about this a little before we jumped on here, I think that the biggest thing I see isn't just like it's about AI or experimenting with it. It really is just leadership mindset as a leader, whether you're a marketer, innovation leader, insights leader. If are you kind of practicing and playing around with these tools daily, experimenting, even with Sora came out? Are you playing around creating videos, trying to understand it? And are you kind of showcasing that with your team? Do you expect that of your team? Are you willing to scale what works? Like that to me is the biggest bottleneck on all this stuff right now, is the capability is there. Again, in some places it's not great, but in a lot of places it's really, really good. And as a leader, are you experimenting and trying and playing around with this stuff and expecting your team to do it? And I feel like that understanding then helps you to, whether you're trying to connect with one strategy studio or FifthRow or whatever, it just gives you context and understanding of how things operate and how like what the potential of this stuff is, right? And I see a lot of leaders not touching it and or expecting different parts of the organization to kind of bring that to the table. And where I see teams on the corporate side and honestly on like the agency side that are really doing well is leadership understands it. They bring the right business folks to the table, and then they bring the right tech folks to the table, and they're crushing it.
Yep.
But it all starts with the kind of leadership demanding just curiosity, experimentation, and actually trying to drive real business value.
I think, you talked about that kind of 20-30% per week of time being spent on that curiosity. I would imagine there's some people listening to this that are kind of like, I don't have 5% of time to look into this. And it reminds me of that kind of old adage, the kind of woodcutter that didn't have time to sharpen his axe and just kept plowing on. And I just think it's so critical, really, to make that time, to have that curiosity, and to, again, it doesn't have to be all on one person. I think that's where teams are getting it wrong. They're, like, this person's the AI specialist. We'll let them kind of go off and figure everything out and then figure out what tools we roll out to everybody. There's just too much happening. The space is moving too fast for this to be, on one person. So I think the leaders, it's really important to them that they get across to their teams, this ability to, as you say, experiment, to try new things, to try, one new tool a week, think about an existing process and figure out, okay, if we redesign this and went back to first principles of what we're trying to do, how would we do this in an agentic world? I think that's that classic innovator's dilemma, right? The bigger the company, the more ingrained those processes are. And this is why you see, companies, as you say, like, some of your investments, one strategy that they've gone back to the drawing board and said, okay, in an agentic world, how would we do this? And it's not always as easy when the pressure of in a large corporate environment to get stuff done.
Yeah, and I think to me there's two sides of it. There's just the individual, like personal productivity side, and I think that's just self-awareness of how are you spending your time? Are you curious, and are you an experimenter? Great, but if you aren't, just talk to people and say, what are you doing? How are you using it? Does it work? Great, just apply it to what you're doing. And then on the capability side, that to me is really the other like layer to this. Like, and I think the agentic AI piece is like huge. Is I talk a lot about this a lot, but I feel like as knowledge workers, we kind of view the world through what we do and how we do it, not outcomes. Yeah. And AI trained right, set up right, prompted right, like and enabled with the right data can automate outcomes. And it's just a very different mindset to say, I'm going to go from an applied approach to this step or these kind of steps to I'm basically going to build the clock, build the system, and get this outcome, whether it's a concept or something that's actually shipped in market and I didn't even touch it. But I think that to me is like the biggest unlock with a lot of this is using agentic AI to automate a lot of the steps and process. There can still be human in the loop in terms of making sure the inputs are right, there's brand consistency and all that kind of stuff. But having that vision of saying we're going to get to market like 90% faster, that's our goal, and we're going to start to play around with an experiment, then I think that's a good thing and a good kind of vision to have. I think like playing around with ChatGPT, Copilot, Claude at the micro level using GPTs is okay, but you can't stop there if you actually want to compete and have a pretty dramatic impact on your pipeline and market results.
1,000%. I want to switch gears and talk a little bit about kind of AI and ROI. So, obviously there's a big push to, be able to measure everything. What was the impact of this? Are we letting ROI get in the way of kind of innovation and discovering? Are we still in that discovery phase and should be putting ROI? The ROI on the long term is kind of obvious in my opinion, but maybe not to everybody. So do you worry that the short term focus on the ROI of every activity that teams are judged on is inhibiting us from thinking more about the bigger picture?
I don't really see, at least in like a lot of my interactions, I don't see a lot of ROI conversations. I do think that there's, if I look at like MIT's like AI failure report and some of the other things like that, I think there's just fundamentals that were off on a lot of initiatives where it's like it's a science project that just AI specialists, the IT are playing around with. It's not linked to the business. The like leadership isn't fluent. It wasn't the right use case, right? But I feel like when you have the right use case, leadership's fluent and involved,
yep,
connected to the P&L, in you're able to have some kind of compounded advantage in terms of like the learning. The system gets better as you kick out learning insights, et cetera, or personalized marketing. It's pretty much a no-brainer. And that then it to me is the bottleneck is leadership curious and driving forward for different ways of doing things, or are we busy like putting a committee together to where it's mid leaders, like nobody from the C-suite's even involved, and we basically have to fight for every dollar in approval to even to kick off something like. So then it becomes more leadership mindset, culture. And again, I wouldn't even say that applies to AI. That applies to a lot of just different technologies and ways of doing things. And so like the teams that I feel like are doing really well, obviously like ROI should be there, but it's almost like it's much more important that leadership is curious and understands kind of what the potential is because they're experimenting and using it. They're choosing the right use cases that are connected to the P&L. The right people from the business are involved, and then you have legit partners and or legit, and like whether internal and or external, and then you actually execute and you learn and you get better. I still see teams that are like pretty good on the first part, but then they'll ship, but they don't iterate and get better. And a lot of it is this stuff, and this is like you have to stay with it long enough to say, okay, do we have the right data? Are we getting the right output? Is the prompt right? And and so that to me is much more of the challenge. But I do think ROI gets questioned when leadership's not fluent. We're choosing the wrong use cases that aren't connected to P&L, and then you have technology that like there's no bridge to kind of commercialization and business, like the business and the actual like implementation. So you're solving the wrong problem that is never going to see the market, whether internal operations and or some kind of external utility for consumers, like never shows up, right? So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
No, it's a great perspective. Let's switch gears a little bit to like the human element of AI. Obviously, there's this focus on AI and speed, but humans still play a key element in this. Obviously, I think some of the adoption has been, or limited adoption has been down to leadership and culture and things like that. I also think there's an element of, like show me the incentive, I'll show you the activities. People are being bombarded right now with, these kind of talks of AI-driven layoffs, and Amazon let 15,000 people go last week, and there's Microsoft another 50,000. So again, you can understand where people sit. I'm sure a lot of people come to you and ask you for advice around where is this heading? How should I be kind of improving my skill set? What does it mean for me? What are your thoughts there as people kind of struggle to adapt to this changing so quickly? You think about the internet and what happened there. Usually these changes take over decades or 3 to 5 year spans. This is on an almost monthly basis moving forward at an incredibly exciting pace, which people like you and I find really exciting, but often people find it overwhelming.
Yeah. Like I would just say like the last 20 years where we built our companies, sold them, like there's a lot of incremental change on the internet, on mobile, but I
Yep.
wouldn't say anything was like completely disruptive, right? So you
Mhm.
could incrementally get better and better. And I'd say like with what's happening with AI, what's happening just like we're not talking a lot about um, tokenized assets and blockchain and all that and robotics, but like I feel like there's a lot of emergent like structural changes that are happening to where this isn't just the internet again or mobile again. Like it is, there's a lot going on that's structurally changing a lot of things. And like to me, the way you stay relevant is and maybe it's just a more human answer. And for me, that's how I kind of balance it too. But you focus on like your why of like, okay, like why are you doing what you're doing? Like, do you have conviction for what you're doing? Like, and I think getting that right in terms of making sure you're even in the right space is an important like conversation to have with yourself to talk and kind of work through that. And I know like there, when you sell a business, like there's soul searching that you go through. Like we've kind of been through that. And so I feel like you've got to do that. And then it's just a matter of like if you have to use this stuff to stay relevant. Like if you want like marketable skills and marketable impact, if you're not using AI and a 22-year-old is, they're going to run circles around you. But then the human aspect of it and the experience aspect of it is there's still like very, very deep insights you can get, whether it's like human insight for a campaign or for a brand. Just deeper, like if you're trying to drive personalization of a particular campaign, there's just deeper insights and nuances that I feel like AI is not capable of getting to right now. And so part of it is using AI to just make sure on the base stuff you're staying relevant and you're adding value, high leverage value, but then you do find the things that give you energy that AI can't do, that you can bring a differentiated like point of view or value to the table, right? And I would say, like, I mean, you look at WPP's market cap, like they're cratered the last couple of years, and there are industry dynamics and things that are happening to where AI and other things that are happening on like even the CPG side or the retail side are really impacting the agencies. And so I don't think you can just kind of sit still and say, okay, I'm gonna learn AI and everything's gonna be great. I'm gonna keep my role, right? Like you almost have to have a refounder mentality on your career and what you're doing and double down on learning and getting better, but don't expect to just be able to hang on to your role for the next 20 years. Because I think there's going to continue to be a lot of turbulence and a lot of change. And I don't think like it's going to be AI is just going to crater a bunch of jobs and there's not going to be any new opportunities. I actually think it's going to create a lot of like jobs and opportunity for people, but it's not going to be a clean roadmap.
Absolutely. I think, you think about, you mentioned CPG as an industry. I mean, you think about the changes we're seeing around kind of the idea of, agentic approaches to shopping, learning preferences, being able to, product discovery. You're already seeing like some of the legacy businesses really struggle with like, now search relevance is less. You've got businesses that are showing up well in kind of Perplexity answers and ChatGPT answers that were originally, were fairly well positioned on Google, and then they've seen 60-70% traffic drop. So yeah, the old playbooks for sure are certainly creaking and are being reinvented as we kind of talk about it. You talked a little bit before about how the compounding effect of kind of AI, and I think that's kind of one of the biggest things. Historically, we've had such a mindset of kind of this iterative project, particularly in the market research industry, of this project by project approach and fragmented learning, siloed data. How do you see kind of AI helping kind of from a kind of compounding returns perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Aura Ring is to me one of the best examples, right? Because it's AI driven tech that it learns on me how I sleep, how I
Yeah.
move, what my stress is, and then it gives me recommendations, and it just keeps getting smarter and smarter and better and better. I think John Deere's See and Spray, it's a little bit of an older innovation, but they basically put like cameras and AI on their tractors that spray for weeds and that sort of thing. And with every spray, it gets better and better in terms of knowing kind of what to hit to where there's the herbicide is not being wasted, right? And
Mhm.
I feel like the same applies to how we learn from a just an insight perspective, how we market, how we build products and services, right? That there's learning that happens, and a lot of times, like we even have learning that's not triangulated across the business, but then we're not also taking the historical perspective and learning and getting better and better,
Yeah.
right? And so I think just having that aura ring mentality of how am I capturing data on this initiative? How am I connecting it to other things? And how am I deriving deeper, better insights that I would never have been able to achieve otherwise? I think as leaders, whether you're running a B2B company, a tech company, or a CPG company, like you've got to be thinking about that. And that to me is when you start to think about AI beyond just base efficiency, is when you start to really unlock some super interesting, like transformative type innovations, whether it's like Aura Ring, it's the John Deere thing, and then oh, by the way, it's a good business because you get locked in. I'm not going to go get another ring because I like my Aura Ring, and
Yeah. That
it's
data.
and it's so. And I like using the pedigree example too of where they basically took shelter dogs and put them up on billboards, and as they were adopted, the AI swapped out. Um, Basically, it learned and swapped out like the pictures of dogs. Right? It's kind
Yeah.
of culturally relevant. It's taps into human insight, but it's not possible without AI. That's not necessarily a compounded example, but I think I like thinking about just baseline, what can you do with AI that you couldn't have done otherwise? But then when you're able to compound learning, what does that enable you to do? And that to me is where the real advantages will come from.
So it's finally kind of a little bit of, I guess, personal reflection, thinking about, you've been in that kind of helping companies innovate space for 20 years. How do you see the innovation life cycle changing over the next 2 to 3 years? What's fundamentally going to stay the same versus what's changing?
Yeah. I think like consumers still want like really good value. They want products and services and experiences that are just great, right? That's not going
Yeah.
to change. I do think how they shop, we were talking about like the agentic um, um, search and that sort of thing, like or the answer engine optimization. So like searching through ChatGPT and agentic agents like shopping on my behalf. Like I do think that that's going to become more pervasive, and the brand managers who aren't really paying attention to that and think somebody else on the tech team is paying attention to that are
Mm.
potentially going to be in for a rude awakening, right? So I think it's understanding how this stuff works, but then how it's going to change shopping behavior, and then how you continue to stay relevant. Like that to me is probably going to be the biggest thing that changes. And then I do think that the expectation on insight to speed to market is just going to continue to accelerate. Like the stuff that Board of Innovation has done with Nestle and Walmart as an example, like it's unreal in terms of how fast they're able to go from what's happening from a market insight to come up with a concept to actually make it and launch.
Yep.
So I feel like for teams that are just kind of starting to play around with this stuff, they're not really taking it seriously. They're at a huge disadvantage. The teams that are starting to leverage it like very strategically and very robustly across the kind of capability spectrum of capability, those are the teams that are just going to crush it. So it's the capability to me is one of the big ones, but then the how consumer behavior changes as start to use more kind of LLMs to interact with things. Atlas helping us just buy stuff for us. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really where a lot of the changes are going to happen.
Agreed. So for listeners who want to move from thinking about AI to actually doing something about it, kind of following your advice, what's one thing they should do this week? Obviously, I've said Whisperflow, download it, check it out. I think that's a massive productivity gain. What's the one tool, platform, whatever it might be, that you'd say, hey, spend a little bit of time this week checking this out?
Yeah, I think I give two answers. One is I think Superhuman's probably the best AI like newsletter that I subscribe to. They have like a list of like 150 tools or something that they're constantly kind of building. Like I feel like that's from a just general like interest. Like I think that's interesting.
Yeah.
And then Board of Innovation has this thing they call Autonomous Conference that's coming up. I think it's in December, but I could be wrong. But check out boardofinnovation.com and look at their autonomous conference. It's really interesting, particularly for enterprise innovation. But yeah, those would be two that I would kind of take a look at.
Fantastic. Well, Jason, it's been great having you as a guest on the on the show. Obviously, if people want to connect, Jason Hauer on LinkedIn, easy to get in touch there and learn a bit more about Jason and the various companies he's building in the HauerX portfolio. Jason, thanks so much for being a guest on the show.
Yeah, great to see you, man. Appreciate you having me.
All right, speak again soon.
Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to AI Role Models. Follow now wherever you get your podcasts to be notified of new episodes. Connect with One Strategy on LinkedIn to join us for live recordings. Don't forget to leave a review, and we can't wait to see you again soon for our next episode.